everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Motivate with Coach Camp. I, of course, am your host, Coach Camp, and we are down here in the SRP studios. This is a temporary location. I know the backdrop's not what most of you guys are used to watching, but today, wow, I do have Derek Michaud up here in the office as well. We have a special guest. We have a very special guest. As y'all know, if you follow me, like I know so many do on a regular weekly basis, I'm a huge baseball fan. And opportunity presented itself to bring in someone that I've seen on TV many times, never had the opportunity to meet. But whenever our mutual connection brought us together, man, I was super excited about it. Being a huge baseball fan, tons of questions. We'll try to get to as many as we possibly can in the short 45-minute to hour that we have. But my guest today is Mr. Andy Fletcher. He is a Major League Baseball coach or umpire. Sorry, Major League Baseball umpire. Just finished up the 2024 World Series where the Dodgers and the Yankees played one another. Can't wait to talk to him, see what all he has to say. Welcome everybody at this time, Mr. Andy. How you doing, sir?
I'm awesome. How you doing today, Coach?
Man, I'm doing fantastic. So you just finished up the World Series. Do you mind if I read off a couple of the accolades that I found about you?
Sure.
All right, so it turns out that you were a two-time World Baseball Classic. You've umped in two times of them, right?
Correct.
Two All-Star games, wild card game series four times, three division series, one league championship series, and then recently the 2024 World Series. And also, as a little side note that I wrote in, which I think is really cool, I want to ask you about, is you were one of the umpires in the Felix Hernandez perfect game. I think you were the third base ump in that one.
I was at third base that day. That's as special to me as anything else you just read off. That was quite a day. There's just been so few perfect games. To be a part of that was unbelievable,
24 to be
and
exact.
and, and to be a part of it with some of my very close friends.
That
Yeah.
does make it more special. So yeah, 24 exactly. That's a rare moment in all of baseball history. Think about how many years baseball's been around. Just 24 of those moments.
Exactly. There's a lot of things like that in baseball that people don't really realize. I don't have the exact number. I've been somewhere around 600, 700 umpires that have ever umpired a baseball game. That may be on the high number because a lot of those
Wow.
guys only umpired one or two games back in the early 1900s. There's only been 200 or so people to ever work at the World Series. I mean, there's a lot of small numbers like that, but 24 is a very small number.
Very small number. And I can remember that game like it was yesterday. Now, no offense, don't remember the umpires on the field, but man, do I remember King Felix. He was dealing. He was dealing on that day. So before we get into all the accolades, because there's so much I want to talk about in the big league realm and stuff, I want to get to know Andy just a little bit. So if you would share with my listeners, viewers, a little bit about where you came from growing up and family members.
Sure. I grew up in Memphis, in the Parkway Village area. I got into officiating because of my dad primarily. Uh, Back in about 1966, he and five other guys started the Parkway Village Youth Football League because they were all former high school football players in all Memphis and that sort of thing. And they enjoyed football more than anything else at the time. That kind of morphed into a baseball league later on as well. But I grew up around the football league, and my dad being one of the board members forever for 35 years or so. My dad also officiated high school football for some 45 years, high school and some small college stuff. So I was always kind of around sports. I went to Harding Academy where I played baseball, football, and basketball there. Not very well, but I played all
What's
the
your best
same.
sport?
Um, I uh, I was not a very good football player. Favorite sport, and baseball, but I enjoyed playing all the sports except I ran track one year. I did not enjoy that. I ran the
Okay, I got a news
400, and
story.
that was to me that was no fun.
I ran track in high school for 2 years, and by run track, I mean I came in last place a lot in track in for 2 years. So I get you on that one. Did you have brothers, sisters?
I had one younger sister. She was a gymnast and a cheerleader. She was a cheerleader at the University of Memphis briefly years ago. But I only had one sibling. Yes,
Yeah. You answered one question I had on here already, which was, did you have any family that was in officiating at any round? But obviously, there was a huge influence early in your life. So that being said, as you played sports, were you thinking professional player, or were you already thinking at an early age, maybe I'll
No,
take
I
the
don't.
same line?
Yeah, I don't think anybody thought I was going to be a professional player. But I'll tell you a story. When I was in high school, my senior year, I had already been doing some, youth league baseball stuff, that sort of thing, and I was doing just below the high school level. And we had a game one day at Harding, and I didn't play a lot, and I'd sit on the bench a lot. But Harold Bodiford was the head coach then, and he'd sit there beside me, and we'd talk. Someone happy, he'd say, "Yeah, the umpires get that right or something?" And I'd, "Yeah, yeah, yeah," or no, or whatever. Um, so one day, an opportunity arose. We were playing a Catholic high school, and an opportunity arose for me to go umpire third base with the Memphis Chicks, Memphis.
Oh, wow.
And I had the opportunity to go work third base that day, but we had a game.
Mm.
Coach Bodford and said, "Hey, coach, this, I'd like to do this." He said, "You know what? I know this is what you really want to do." He goes, "You go do it." He goes, "There's going to be some extra, punishment for you. You have to run some extra laps or whatever when you get back, but you go ahead and do it." And I did, and it was what an experience it was. It was a pretty big crowd. They played at the old Timber Carver Stadium, and that was my first experience into umpiring. Um, a bigger venue with
Pros,
people
that's the
actually watching,
pros.
not just a kids game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How old were you at that
And
time?
I was a senior in high school, so
17,
17,
18.
18 years old.
Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't even have a proper uniform. I wore my dad's old shirt, some shoes that were too big for me. Um, just found some pants in the closet, dress pants, and put them on, and went out there and did it.
Wow. What were the nerves like?
I was scared to death. I was probably more scared then than I was when I worked the World Series a couple of weeks ago, quite honestly.
Look, at 17, 18 years old, you got eyes on you. I mean, make a bad call and they're going to chew you up. So, was that your very first officiating moment? Like, were you ever on other
No.
fields like Little League?
Oh yeah, I umpired Little League. I umpired quite a bit of Little League at that time. Uh, the reason I told you about my dad starting the Little League football league primarily was because on Saturdays and Sundays, that's when they'd play the youth league games. And when my dad had finished coaching and I was, out, not playing anymore, but still 15, 16 years old, I would go out and referee those youth games, the little Pee Wee kids games. And that's kind of where I learned to officiate. Um, on Sunday afternoon, they had some of the top officials in all of the area. Guys that were college football referees would come back and just kind of help my dad out with kind of pay back to their dues or whatever to the youth leagues. And there were some really good football officials who taught me how to officiate. If you can officiate, football, you could probably officiate basketball, and you could probably officiate baseball. It's a skill that is more about handling people and situations than it is anything else.
You can see how, especially basketball and then particularly football officiating. I mean, obviously, you guys are assigned to a certain area that you're watching, line judge, whatever, but the game moves so fast that when you compare it to baseball, it's really not moving as fast. So the game of baseball is a little bit easier to follow, I think, as far as like, being able to see the play in the moment. You can definitely dispute that. I've never officiated other than just like 16 years old. And well, a couple of parents yelled at me and I'm like, you know what, this ain't for me. So they were brutal.
So football I always enjoyed, but football you had, like you said, areas of responsibility. You were only worried about certain things going on. A lot of times, there was a last Saturday there was a game on TV where they were yelling about that the referee didn't see a hold. Well, the referee, the white hat guy, he was not looking for the hold. He's watching the quarterback the whole time. He's only looking for roughing the passer and things that go on with the quarterback. He's not looking at a guy could be 2 feet
Sure.
beside him, holding. Basketball is kind of the same way. You're divided into to triangles on the floor, and you're working a three-man crew. Um, that game goes at such a great pace, though. I really enjoyed my referee basketball. I refereed high school basketball for I don't know 20 something years,
Wow.
and really enjoyed the pace of that game as opposed to the other games. Baseball is different. Baseball is more about being in the right position. I had an old umpire. Guy who umpired more Major League Baseball games than anybody else, Joe West. I worked I worked on his crew for 5 years and learned a
Wow.
tremendous amount from him. But he always had a saying. He said, to give yourself the best opportunity to make the correct call, you need to do three things. One of them is position. You got to be in the right spot, so you have to know where to be.
Mhm.
Two is timing, and when I say timing, what I mean is slowing the game down. Much like the best players in the world, are able to slow the game down, and just see things at a slower pace. Same thing is true of officiating. A really good official has the ability to slow the game down and not be in a hurry to do anything. And the last one is you just got to have good judgment. And some people have it and some people don't. But if you have those three things, your chances of being right in a baseball game are pretty darn good. And you can really carry that over other sports as well.
Yeah. Since you brought Joe West up, there was a moment that I love. Do you know which one I'm talking about? It's infamous. It's all over the internet. The
Well,
moment with
Joe,
him,
Joe had a lot.
he's got a lot, but the one with him and Madison Bumgarner. Do you know the one I'm talking about where they had the great
Yeah,
20-second stare down and
I
they've
do.
got like Western music playing in the background? That's
I
awesome.
was I was not working with him that year, but that took place in San Diego,
Mm.
and his crew was leaving San Diego that night, and my crew was coming in. So we actually met after the game and had a cold drink and talked about it, and it was on
They say, I
TV
got
every.
to hear what was behind the scenes on that.
Look, nobody wants to be the show as an umpire and official. You really don't. Um, but sometimes you have to do things to make everybody understand that you have to be in charge of this. Somebody has to be in charge. Somebody has to be the one in charge. And how you go about that, some people have different ways of doing it. And Joe, to his credit, Joe never ever, I never heard him curse one time on the field. He never really lost his temper on the field. But he would do things like that to make you understand, hey, I don't really care how important, you're a superstar and how important you think you are. I'm still going to be in charge of this game. I'm the final word. So you have a choice to make. If you want to continue to play, then you're gonna have to play within the rules of the game and behave in a certain manner.
Right. He's a legend. You take the thing about legends. There are certain people that just have the personality and those moments. And you're right. There's so many moments of Joe West that we could talk about, but that's just the one that stands out so much to me. And I actually was watching that game whenever that took place, and it was absolutely classic. So what was when you were growing up? Obviously, you had your dad. He was doing a lot of officiating. Says that you got into all the different sports. Was there ever a moment you were thinking maybe you would do something outside of sports whenever you grew up? Was there ever another interest, another hobby?
The only thing that I ever thought that I might be interested in, ironically, is law enforcement. And it's kind of the same idea. And quite honestly, a lot of my former partners from the minor leagues ended up going to law enforcement. One of my very best friends was a longtime a police officer in Scottsdale, Arizona. We talk all the time. He was in my wedding. I mean, we stayed in touch over the years. And just saw him at the World Series. He works for baseball security as well. And we talked about that a lot. It's amazing how many guys do that. He always had a saying. He said, the only difference between what I do and what you're doing now is that when you throw them out, they have to go somewhere else. When I throw them out, they have to come with me. Yeah. I
That's a
think there's a
good
few more
point.
differences in that, but
But
yeah,
what an interesting correlation. I had no idea what your answer would be to that, but that is fascinating. There are a lot of things that definitely one job can mimic another, and then you see a lot of crossover on that. But law enforcement, I guess I could see that because you guys are officiating, you're having to know the rules inside and out, and the police officer kind of needs to do the same thing on that. So let me ask you, on the age groups before you got to the big leagues, because we're about to get into some of your big league years and stuff. What was the hardest age group for you to ump? I have an idea of what it might be, but I want to hear you say it.
it's just the little kid games because the parents are insane
That's
oftentimes.
it.
And, it was fun. It was fun for me to go when my son was playing little league to go. I'd have to go stand somewhere else because I couldn't be around because I couldn't take a chance on somebody realizing who I was and I certainly wasn't yelling at the umpires or referees or whatever sport he was playing. So it's interesting to watch from a distance to watch people just grown people just lose their mind, but it's their kids. They think their kids are, everybody's kid's going to play in the big leagues. Everybody's kid's going to play in the NBA or the NFL, whatever. Um, so yeah, that's the
So
most difficult by far.
so often 6 through 9 year olds. My little short stint of umping, and then I've coached for 30 years. So coach camp's not just some clever name and a mantra. I really have been a coach, and it's baseball and softball in particular for 30 years. But man, the young kids are easy to manage. It's the parents, and for all the things that you just said, and they really have an opinion. And then if they all think they're a better coach too. So that's also another situation. But nevertheless, I was curious about that. So when you were growing up and you get into umping more, you did 10 years in the minors, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Correct. Correct.
Did, talk to the people. So not everybody understands the ranks and how it works. So is it pretty similar to that of Major League Baseball players? We have like single A, double A, triple A, and you got to work your way up as an umpire, or is it pretty fluid?
It's exactly the same way, with the only exception being um, that as an umpire you had to go through every level. Sometimes players jump levels and skip levels or whatever.
Mhm.
Sometimes like Paul Skeens, he just almost went straight to the big leagues.
Right.
Um, it's unusual, but it happens. For umpires, that'll never happen. But never say never. Things have changed a great deal since I went to umpire school in 1989. Um, the minor leagues are not the same as they were then. The leagues aren't the same, set the same way they were then, and the officiating scenario is different as well because of that. So
Yeah.
people are getting a chance to go to the big leagues earlier now than we did. 10 years was pretty normal. There were a few guys who did it faster, and a lot of guys who did it took a few years more to get there. I was pretty fortunate 10 years.
So was there a specific amount of time that they expected you to be at each level, or was it just according to how well you performed? And to that same question, how do they judge when they think you're ready to move up?
Well, that's a question. If I knew the answer to, I'd be gazillion there because I have no idea. Uh, because in the minor leagues, you have no idea who's whether you're right, wrong, or otherwise. There's no instant replay or video replay of any kind. It's all just what you see, and everybody thinks they're right. I think more than anything else, what they're looking for is people who could manage the game and manage people. There's so much more to umpiring than balls and strikes and safes and outs. You have to be able to manage people and manage the game, manage situations. I learned on my very first day in the Appalachian League, we had a rain delay, or actually a rain out. My first game was a rain out,
Oh, wow.
and my partner was we were the only crew that had two rookies. Every other crew had a rookie and a second year guy on the crew, and we had no idea what we were doing. We just completely just playing it by ear. And I'll never forget that it turned out the GM was a female, which at the time was pretty unusual in the minor leagues. I was not expecting that. She came and found me and said, "Honey, we got a big problem here." She goes, "It's going to come a frog grounder." And we were in Kingsport, Tennessee. It's
Hmm.
going to come a frog grounder. She goes, "I don't know how in the world we're going to get this game in, but we're going to try." She goes, "I got good news and bad news. The bad news was the frog grounder. The good news is we got a brand new tarp, one for the mound and one for the plate." I'm thinking, well, what about the rest of the field?
All right.
And she finally said, "Baby," she goes, "we're not going to be able to get this game in." She goes, "But if you'll give me a couple of hours here, I'm selling more hot dogs and cold beer than I've ever sold." And she goes, "If you just give me a couple of hours to sell my stuff, I'll take you across the street to a great pizza place and we'll buy you and your partner pizza and beer tonight." Well, you can't do that, but we'll give you time. But the point of that story is I learned the very first day that baseball is a business and you have to learn how to handle not only people on the field, but people off the field. You got to deal with general managers and all sorts of people. So it's more to it than balls and strikes and saves and outs.
It's really not something I even considered. I didn't think about that. So now I know whenever it's long, long rain delay at the big league level, and it's just like, why are we still waiting? Maybe they still need to sell a few more things in the gift shop.
So
Let's go.
sometimes that's true. Most of the time in the big leagues, it's there are business decisions, and there's a number of people on the phone calls. The phone calls are linked up between New York and the ballpark and the visiting teams, general managers, and us. And it's not just people sitting around having a coke waiting for it to stop raining. There's a whole bunch of stuff behind the scenes going on.
Sure. I have one friend named Steve Dew that umped all the way up to AAA. Do you know Steve? Just he's so I didn't know if maybe you know him.
I umpired a lot of games with Steve over the years, a lot of college baseball games with Steve. Talked to him via text a couple of weeks ago. He was nice enough to congratulate me on getting a World Series. So yeah, I've known Steve for a long, long time.
Yeah, he's on the Memphis Fire Department. I'm retired Memphis
Oh,
Fire. So I
yeah,
worked with him and for him a handful of times over the years, and I know he upped all the way up to the AAA level and
yeah.
then never went up from there. So
Mm.
when you were going up through the ranks, was there like a time when you started to think this is going to be the moment, and then it wasn't, and you never made it up there at that time's frame, and then you started to think about maybe I need to give up. The reason I asked that, I have a lot of friends, several friends that made it up to single A, double A, triple A in Major League Baseball, and they never could break that ceiling and get in there. Is that the same kind of feeling that some umps feel, and they feel like, well, I'm spinning my wheels and I'm not sure what else I need to do?
Sure. I'll never forget a night I was sitting in Salt Lake City, Utah. I'd been in AAA for several years, and one of my very close friends, Mike Everett, who's I think he worked three World Series. He's retired now. He's one of my supervisors now. But we were sitting in Salt Lake City after a game one night, just miserable, looking at ESPN, and everybody that we knew from AAA seemed like was in the big leagues, filling in an open spot for somebody who's injured or sick or whatever. And we kept seeing more and more people that were our time. Like he found it and he goes, "If you knew what you know now, back then, would you do this again?" I said, "I absolutely would. I've had a blast. If this doesn't work out in the end, so be it. I've learned life skills. I've learned how to travel. I've learned how to, manage situations and people. I think that I would be a great employee
Hmm.
for somebody. So yeah, I would. Uh, but we also think about how long are we going to keep doing this? Now you get to be 30 something years old, and if you don't get a job in the big leagues, then now who's going to hire you? Even though you have these life skills, hard to find a job at 35 years old when you've done nothing but umpire baseball games.
And one of my friends that he's a firefighter now. He played for the Dodgers organization, got up to AAA, and it was kind of that situation where he was getting closer to 30, and he started thinking about, I can't make a career in the minor leagues because it just didn't pay enough. Even as a ball player, I don't know what they pay umpires, but I know at the big league level, unless you're
It
one of
ain't
the elite
much.
guys, yeah, it's not much for them. You're doing it for the love, right? And the idea and the hope that you eventually can scale up to
That's
the big leagues.
that's what it is. It's all about having the opportunity to take the chance. If you make it, it's all worth it. You
Sure,
know,
sure. Absolutely. What is the travel like? I would imagine it's pretty much the same as what the guys told me. When you're in single double A, it's a lot of bus rides, long nights, leave one city, have to drive forever to get to the next city, kind of tough stuff.
the only difference is we don't have a bus driver. We had to drive ourselves from city to city.
Wow. Wow, really?
We in the low minor leagues. One of the guys, it may be different now, but in the low
Mhm.
minor leagues back then, they paired the crews up by guys who had a car and guys who didn't have a car they could drive.
How about
So
that?
and they paid them, 10 cents a mile or whatever it was, and you just got in the car and drove your car wherever it was. And double A, they finally get you a van because there were three guys working together. They rented us a van, and we just went from town to town to town. And triple A, you did fly, but you flew on, bottom of the barrel back just before 9/11. So you could they'd buy cheap tickets and just pass them around with different names. And I'd be flying one time. I'd be John Smith flying in the back of the plane somewhere. Uh, that was a long time ago. I kind of forgot about that till you maybe mentioned that there.
So it's funny because I think that sometimes, especially when you've achieved a lot. So now we're just talking about how you just finished up the World Series, but you know, folks can see a person. Austin Riley is a great example from the
Mhm.
DeSoto County area. I'm sure you're very familiar with Austin, obviously.
Sure.
Come out of DeSoto County, play for DeSoto Central. Um, they don't always think about the people that have to grind and grind. Austin was an elite talent, went through the ranks pretty quickly,
Mhm.
excelled at AAA level, wasn't there very long, and then he's in the big leagues and he's,
Right.
he's one of the top talents in the big leagues. But for so many people that are like or that are not like an Austin Riley, they're having to grind. And that's part of the story I want people to hear about you is that it wasn't a give me. And yeah, you just did a World Series, but man, there were so many years you had to put the work in and you didn't know if that day was going to come. And it would be easy to think about giving up, but you didn't and you kept grinding. So all that said, what was it like the first time you get the phone call? And I'm assuming it's similar, but you get a phone call and you're like, Andy, we need you to come to the big leagues. What is that feeling like?
Well, obviously, I'll never forget that day.
Yeah.
I was in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, and a night or two before, I'd been working the plate there, and I got hit with a foul ball, and they thought that it broke my elbow, and they took me by ambulance from the field to the hospital, and it turned out it was not broken, but it was really badly bruised and really swollen. I couldn't move it. It felt like it was broken, honestly. And I was saying, and the league president was Branch Rickey Jr. And Branch was always very good to me. And he called me and said, "Hey, I'm going to send a local guy to work with your crew for a couple of days. You take a couple of days off. I want you to heal up. Uh, you can't work like this. Just relax for which is very unusual in the minor leagues. You just don't get any days off. I mean, you work hurt all the time." And my answer to Branch was, "No, no, I can do this." And because you didn't want to take a chance of not being on the field when someone was watching. And he goes, "No, no, I'm not asking you. I'm telling you, take the day off." And so I think it was the second day. And back then, cell phones were brand new, and I did have a cell phone, but we never answered in Canada because it cost me a zillion dollars
Right.
to take a phone call in Canada. But if the same number kept calling, and kept calling, and kept calling, I turned it on every once in a while just to check, and oh, but this is a San Diego number. Who is this? And then it hit me that the National League boss was lives in San Diego. It's Paul Runge. And I was like, oh my gosh. And I answered the phone and I finally listened to the message. He said, you got to call me right away. So I called him. He uh he said, "Hey, congratulations. The National League has picked you up and we want you to sign a contract with the National League." And the National League president, Leonard Coleman, is going to call you in a few minutes and they're going to fax you a contract to your hotel in Calgary, which was just he goes, go down there and tell the front desk that this is going to be a very large document. and put lots
Wow.
of paper in the fax machine because it's gonna. And then you need to sign it and send it back. And then a few minutes later, the Leonard Coleman called me and said and congratulated me to the National League. And I couldn't even speak. I was like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? And I wasn't going to work for in the National League for a few more weeks. I wasn't going to go up full time. Um, it was funny because my wife was very pregnant with our son Andrew, and my mom and my wife were driving and looking at cribs, and we've been having a big argument about she wanted to buy this crib that you could convert into a toddler bed and all this other stuff, and it's just too much. You can't afford that. I'm in the minor leagues.
Hmm.
She made a lot more money than I did. She was a nurse, a pediatric oncology nurse at St. Jude. She was making the money, and she's like,
Yeah.
"I think we can afford this." But I finally said, "I guess go." I called her and said, "Hey." She said, we're on the way right now. And she goes, I agree. We can't afford this bed. You're right. I said, you know what, honey? Buy the bed. Just buy the bed. She goes, no, we can't afford it. Yeah, we can because I just got hired by the National League.
That's a great
So
story.
they had to pull off the side of the road because my mom was as excited. My mom was one of my biggest fans as well. They couldn't contain themselves. They were so excited. So
Awesome. So, with big leaguers, they have an agent. Do the umpires, do you guys work through an agent or do you just make the
no, we don't.
decisions for yourself?
We collective bargain.
Okay.
Yeah. So we have like basically a union. And
Yeah.
so we're actually in the middle of negotiations right now. Our contract expires on December 31st, and I think they had a meeting today or yesterday, with Major League Baseball in New York.
Okay. So with the big leaguer, whenever they get called up, they're obviously going to a team and they're going to move their family to whatever that usually they're going to move to that city that they're going to be playing their 81 home games in. For an umpire, is it the same? Do you stay in a region or do you move all over the country?
No, you move all over the country. You generally work with a crew when you're hired as a AAA umpire going up. And I didn't work any games most of the time. Now you work some games. They call it the up and down umpire. So you go from AAA to the big leagues on an as needed basis. If somebody's hurt, if we get several days of vacation days now. So if one of the guys is on vacation, we have a AAA guy fills in that spot. That's how they get experience working in the big leagues.
Okay.
I never did that. I got hired and I was a big league umpire. Um, but normally speaking, there's 19 crews of four. Um, every week there's 15 crews working on the field somewhere. There's two crews that are on vacation every week, and there's two crews that are working in New York in the replay room every week. Um, so that's kind of where everybody's lined up. But you're on a crew. Generally speaking, if you're a full time major league umpire, you're on a crew of four that stays together, and the crew chief, based on his seniority, picks a schedule. So there's 19 schedules, and the crew chief before the season gets to choose schedules, and you just follow that schedule the rest of the year. So I know where I'll be on the first day and the last day of the season.
How many games do you think roughly you will end up umping in a full season?
I just saw it today because they just sent some information to us.
That's why
I
I was
think
asking. I'm just kidding.
yeah, I think I worked 120 regular season games this year,
Mm.
and then I went to Korea to open the season with the Dodgers and the Padres this year. I had a pretty good year. I started
Be
by going
cool.
to Korea and
Yeah.
ended with the World
I
Series.
didn't have that on your bio.
Yeah, things worked out pretty good this year. So I had some games in Korea, and then I think I had like, I don't know, 10 spring training games, and then however many playoff games after that. So it turned out to be like 160 something games I ended up working uh, this year.
And how often? I mean, I'm assuming it's like when you're with the crew, you guys are rotating the position that you're umping each game. So, how many of those are behind the plate? Because if you're asking me, and I don't know, but it seems like the home plate ump carries the lion's share of the work. Would you agree with that?
Sure, most nights.
Yeah, most nights.
That's why you do rotate.
Mhm.
Generally speaking, on opening day, the crew chief works the plate on opening day, or that crew's opening day, because sometimes the crew may be off the first week, just the way the schedule works out. So whenever that crew's first game is, the crew chief generally works behind the plate. The
Mhm.
guy with the second most seniority is at first, the next guy at the second, and the youngest guy at third, and you just rotate the rest of the season that way. There are going to be times when they pull guys from crews and change things around, so you kind of get out of rotation sometime. But generally speaking, that's the way you work. So you're going to work the same amount, ideally, at each base every year. But I was just looking at something. Somebody sent me something today, just showed me how many games. I'm pretty close to 3,000 games now. I think it's like 200
Wow.
2,920 games or something like that. So I should make 3,000 games this next season. um, and it breaks them down by bases. But I have worked more plate jobs over the year than I have any other base. I worked plate first, the least at second, and then third after that.
Didn't have the year you got called up. So what year was that?
1999.
So 99. So for this will be almost, well, we're going into
Just-
2025. So you're closing
So
in on
it's
30 years.
yeah, it's 20. I have 25 years and a half. I got my first year because I got hired mid-season. I got a half year service for pension purposes. So I just completed 25 and a half years in big leagues.
So what's the retirement like? Is it a regular like because I know like with big leaguers, they're vested after 10 years, correct?
Yeah, correct. I believe that's correct. Yeah. For us, it's completely different. We have all sorts of different things. I have a traditional pension. The younger guys don't have that. They have a defined contribution, like so many businesses are going to now. Again, this is all a business. Don't forget. I mean,
Sure.
this is another business. And how retirement stuff goes, I'll let you know after we reach a new contract. But
Contract.
in the past, it's been pretty good. I have several avenues.
Yeah, so I'm asking a lot of questions I've always been curious of.
Sure.
I have had friends that officiate, but never at the big league level. You're the first guy I've ever spoke to that's officiated at the big league level. So I figured there was some very nuanced things that happen there versus the lower levels, obviously. So now I want to ask you some questions about the big leaguers themselves. One thing that stands out to me, being a Yankees fan, diehard Yankees fan, grew up, Don Mattingly fan, love me some Mattingly. My daughter's name is Mattingly. My wife didn't want to go with Don. I don't know what's wrong with her. But I'm like, I'm diehard Yankees fan. I always wonder, what does Soto say to the umpires every time he comes up to the plate?
Nothing in particular, just different things. I mean, just pleasantries of how you doing, hello, whatever.
Curious. I've
He
met him
is
that way yet, but it's like sometimes you'll see him keep engaging, and I'm like, is he asking questions or
and
always like,
sometimes he likes to kind of joke around a little bit more than some other guys do. So sometimes he'll joke around a little bit with some things that are funny or whatever. Just a little back and forth. We had a nice conversation during the World Series. He came up to me and hey, how do they pick the guys to work the World Series? I said, I don't know why. I think we do is just we flip coins, and all the guys that get heads on the first flip, and they all stand in one group, and then flip again, and same thing. And he looked at me for a second like I was serious, and he's like, "Oh, you're so crazy." Yeah. So I mean, do we have just little interactions like that sometimes?
yeah, he's very much theater, which I really his personality I think actually makes the game a lot of fun. I like watching him. And before we started here, you said something to me that is fascinating. So I just divulged that I am a diehard Yankees fan, and obviously a Don Mattingly fan. And you told me before we started that you've kicked out Mattingly more than any other coach.
Yeah.
He was always a rascal on the Yankees when he was a player, but I had no idea he had that kind of temper as a coach.
I just, you know what, it just happens to be that guy for me.
Yeah.
All of them were with the Marlins, and two of them were he was protecting his players, kind of thing. And and the third one was it's three times total. The third one was I ejected his pitcher for intentionally throwing at a hitter. He had been warned, so he had to be ejected. So all in all, we were around each other quite a lot when he was with the Marlins, and the Dodgers for that matter. I had the Dodgers quite a bit when he was hitting coach there, and I think he was a bench coach for a while with the Dodgers as well. So we've been around each other a lot, and and now he's in Toronto. Is I don't they've
Coach,
created so many new
some kind of
coaches
correction.
positions. I'm not sure what they are,
Yeah.
but he's kind of like a bench coach there. We still have conversations and joke around a little bit, and I've always liked Don. But he is a guy that I've thought it just happens to be three is the most I've thrown anybody out, and that's him. So
It's fascinating. I think back to some of the classic coaches that are just known for throwing folks or for throwing a fit and then being thrown out. Did you ever have a chance to meet or be around Earl Weaver or Lou Piniella or Billy
oh,
Martin?
Lupa, no Billy Martin, no Earl Weaver. I think I met Earl Weaver once, maybe, but just not in a managing coaching position, whatever. But yeah, Lupinella was around several years with he was in Tampa and in Seattle. So yeah, I was around him quite a bit. We never had any crazy knockdown dragouts. I think I threw about once in Tampa, but it was no big crazy thing or anything. No throwing bases or all that.
Man, who was it? God, I can't remember. can't remember who it was that went into the dugout and started throwing everything out of the dugout. I mean, like the bats, the balls. Cannot remember. I could see it in my head, but I don't remember who the coach was. But since we're talking about throwing coaches out, can you tell us about the first time you had to throw a coach out? Do you remember
The
that day?
very My very first ejection was in San Diego. It was the pitching coach for San Diego, and I'll never forget. He came to the mound, and they were playing the Braves, and they're San Diego was getting beat about 10-0 or whatever. And I went to break up the mound visit, and he looked at me and goes, "Andy, how's your day going?" I go, and I was, I don't know, 25, 30 games into the big leagues. And
Mhm.
my day's fine. This meeting is over. Let's go. I was just very businesslike, And he's like, no, the meeting ain't over. Let me tell you what's going to happen because we're getting our brains beat out. And I've had enough of this. And I'm going to get thrown out. And you're going to throw me out. And I'm going to yell and scream and all this. I said, oh, I'm going to eject you, but we're not going to have an argument. He goes, oh, yeah, we are. And just to throw him out, Bruce Fleming, another long time kind of famous umpire, was the crew chief that day. And he came and he goes, hey, get off the field. And the guy just stopped and just looked at Bruce and said, I think I'll just leave. And so he just left rather than mess with Bruce. So that was my first. Kind of uneventful compared to some of the other ones, I guess. But that was my very first one.
Yeah, I always wonder what the conversations are like. There's been a couple that have been mic'd up, and you hear the back and forth, and it's kind of funny. I can't remember the umpire that was involved, but it was one with the Mets, and he threw out Syndergaard, and it's all over the internet too. But he was just like, I've got to throw you out in that situation, and it was very audible. Just always curious. I really wish I had some good clips of Earl Weaver because that dude would throw the hat around backwards and it was go time at that point. But so I've kind of covered quite a bit of how you get to where you are. So let's talk about some of your greatest memories on the field with ball players. What are some of the unique moments? Because as an umpire, you got a better than front row seat. You're on the field with the players. You get to see some stuff. We've already talked about the no hit game, the perfect game rather, not just a no hit
Perfect.
game.
Yeah.
What are some of the other unique, great moments that you've been a part of?
People ask me this all the time, and you'd think that I would have a much better answer than I do because I really don't. Because while I love the game of baseball, a great deal. I am
Mhm.
not a fan. I don't keep up with the stats. I couldn't tell you who's hitting
It's
what.
amazing.
Uh, yeah, most years. I mean, every now and again, I'll look at the score. I look at the scoreboard. They don't even have the batting average on the scoreboard anymore. It's all OPS and all this other stuff that I don't even know what half of that stuff means. Quite honestly, that's how little of a fan I am.
Wow.
My job is just about being balls and strike safes and outs, handling situations, and handling this game. Where I don't, I just, I don't know. I don't have. Some of my favorite games I ever had up until up to the World Series this year. I think my people would always say, "What was your favorite plate job?" And I don't remember what year it was. That's another thing I'm terrible at. People always say back in '85, but I have
Mhm.
no idea. But I do remember it was Randy Johnson pitching against Dontrell Willis, and it was a like a Wednesday night ESPN game. One of my first ESPN games behind the plate, and I just remember it being an unbelievably good baseball game because as important to me as a pitcher is, a good pitcher makes my job easier. A good
Or
catcher makes my job even easier. And that day I had Damian Miller was catching Randy Johnson, and I'd had Damian all through the minor leagues, and he was an unbelievably good catcher. In my opinion, the best catcher I ever worked behind. And
wow.
Pudge Rodriguez was catching for Miami, obviously a fantastic catcher as well. And those two guys, both the pitchers were on. And I think there's a guy, Shea Hildebrand. He may still be standing at home plate. I think I rang him up like four times in that game. It was just unbelievable. Just these guys were just dealing that night. It was just the memory of that game was always my favorite up until working the World Series this year.
Yeah. That is interesting that you remember just two pitchers going at it and having a really great game. I remember Dontrell Willis during his heyday. They called him the
Mm.
D train. And
Right.
man, he had that knee kick that would go way up there. It was just unique. I don't know how in the world he could throw the ball with accuracy with all that. You had to have great balance, great core strength. And we both know that Randy Johnson was not always so accurate. Um, Made a lot of left-handed batters very skittish in the batter's box over his years, but I did like Randy whenever he came over to the Yankees for a short stint when he was over there. So, did you grow up having a favorite team?
I really did.
Wow.
I never, as because my football team, my dad coach was the Packers. I've always been a Packer football fan, but I'm not really a fan of anything. It's people don't understand this. It's hard to explain. It's almost impossible to explain. Just that
Mhm.
part of it is because I've seen the other side of these games. Um, I'm just not a fan.
It's
I,
interesting.
I am a fan. I went to Ole Miss briefly. I am a fan of Ole Miss football and basketball.
Mhm.
I'm part of a ton of Ole Miss baseball games before I made it to the big leagues over the years. But I, a friend of mine used to have season tickets to the basketball games. He'd take me along sometimes, and he'd stand there, he'd scream at the referees and the whole game and all this. And I'm like, what are you doing? And he goes, you're no fun. He goes, this is ridiculous. What are you doing? I go, well, first of all, you look ridiculous as a grown man screaming at these people. Secondly, they're right because and I know these people. You know, these are people I know. I mean, I know so many college basketball referees. I know a ton of the NBA basketball referees. So I'm certainly not gonna go scream at them. They're my friends. You know, that's why I can't watch a game with I can't watch a game with the sound on hardly ever because I can't listen to the commentators talk about my friends. You know, no matter what you think of them, whether they're right, wrong, or otherwise, they're still my friends.
Good point. And that's a perspective most people obviously will never have. You've already mentioned the low amount of numbers of people that actually make it to the big leagues in the open capacity. So that is, you think about all the big leaguers over the years, you roughly have around 700, maybe a little more players that are playing
Mhm.
on the,
Sure.
in a season, much less than that as far as the umpires go. So it is a very unique scenario there. And I do think it's extremely fascinating that you're not a true fan of any of it because it just seems like you to be that involved because you have to know a lot of rules. I got to be honest with you. So like I'm
Probably should
coaching.
know all of them.
I mean, you should know all of them, but have there? That's a great question. Has there been a moment you're like, give me a second, I got to go get somebody?
Sure. Yeah. Luckily, I have had a good crews around me. In particular, this year, I spent this year as a crew chief, an acting crew chief. I hope to be a full-time crew chief next season, which is never something that I aspired to be. It's just kind of working the World Series is something that I aspired to. That was my last goal. This
Awesome.
crew chief thing has kind of come out of nowhere. So I very much enjoyed being a crew chief last year. Um, but it's very important to have good crew with you that's knowledgeable as well. And I learned that refereeing high school football, having an umpire, the guy in the umpire position. That guy, he's got to be your best friend if you're the referee because he's the guy that's going to help you with the rules. He's the guy that's going to know how to mark the penalties off, where they're marked from, and because there's so many different variations. The same thing in baseball. You got to have a good guy, a good number two guy on your crew that can really you can lean on.
Wondered this before. Do you guys have an earpiece where, like, if there's something going on, somebody can read it down to you and be like, "Hey, look,
Uh,
it's sub two, part three, blah blah blah." Nothing like
yeah,
that. No.
right now we don't. Maybe in the future something like that may happen. We do. I do have an earpiece and a microphone on uh, for when we do go to replay. I could talk to replay. I could talk to the umpire that's in New York handling the replay. So and there are no more protests in baseball. There used to be where you could protest a game. You can't protest anymore. If it got to that point, we would do exactly what you just said. We would go to the headset and the microphone and ask them, but only in extreme situations like that.
Yeah, it's fascinating because there are changes all the time. So you have to constantly stay up with that. I'll cross relate that a little bit because I'm a retired firefighter paramedic, but now I teach paramedic school. And in the world of medicine, things are constantly changing and the rules change and how you would approach one type of call this year, it could be very different come next year, depending on what the problem is. And so in baseball, these rules are constantly changing. How much work does it take to keep up with that? Because we know of a bunch of changes that just happened recently. Obviously, we got the pitch clock now. We have bigger bases. You only have so many times that a pitcher can throw over. How difficult is it to stay on top of that stuff?
It has become extremely difficult. It's the game has changed more in the last 20 years than it has in the history of the game, and I've been
Yeah.
around for those 20 years. And in particular, the last 10 years, things have changed. All the things that you just mentioned, some of them don't affect me at all. The bigger bases, well, whatever. At first, I thought this is silly, and then I saw it and I go, "Well, I like this." It gives everybody more room to work around the bases, and it kind of
Mhm.
makes my job easier. I think I have everything's not just in one little cramped spot. Now things are spread out a little bit more. The pitch clock has been fantastic. It's taken the game back to where it was when I first got into the game with that kind of a pace, 30 years ago. But with that comes a lot of new rules, a lot of new responsibilities that were put on the umpires. There's a lot that goes into this. I got to worry about whether a pitcher's on the rubber or not. I got to worry about when the clock starts. I got to worry about if the batter's looking at the pitcher with 8 seconds on the clock. just a ton of different things are going on here, and not the least of which is I need to get this pitch right when he finally does throw it, if he
Mhm.
throws it in time or not. Too, I got to make that decision. We have
How it
a couple
works
of
because I'm
buzzers.
watching it on the screen at the house, so I'm assuming there's probably something up in the center field or something you guys can see.
Yeah, there's I believe five clocks total. There's two in the outfield, there's two on the behind the batter, and there's one like on the press box. And
Mhm.
then each umpire, the primary responsibility for this is the home plate umpires, but every umpire wears a belt pack that vibrates when the clock when time
Okay.
expires. So
Okay.
that's because I can't watch the clock and watch the picture, so I'm
Sure,
counting
that's
on the
what I was
vibration
wondering.
to let me know. Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
these rules, obviously, some of them I like, some of them I don't. That's how it goes. That's the name of the game, right? I'm not a big fan of the limited times to throw to first, but I also know a pitcher can abuse that. But it does give that pitcher a second to kind of reset in a tense situation. Is there a certain rule that you love or a certain rule that you are not a fan of that you could speak of? You may not be able to say, I don't like this rule. I don't know how it works, but what's your favorite rule that they've changed
Yeah,
to?
well, the clock is my
The
favorite
pitch clock.
by
Yeah.
far. I think it basically it made the game again what it was when I first started. It's a much better game for the fans to watch. I mean, I hear this over and over and over from fans that just love it. Very few say they don't like it. I also like the restriction on the pitcher throwing to first base. It got to be sometimes just silly. We're just wasting time here doing nothing. Let's play the game, kind of thing.
Question I have for you though on the pitch changes. Now you got to pitch to three batters. Do you see that changing at any time? Because obviously you bring a pitcher in, they can kind of manipulate who they're going to have to bat. That could also change the situation of how you're going to manage that point in the game. Do you think there'll be any changes on that?
There certainly could be. I mean, everything's up to possibly be changed at any point in
Sure.
time. I mean, this is a work in progress for sure. I think that everybody's really pretty happy with the three batter minimum. Um, eh, Same reasons. It's we had the situation where we're just changing pitchers every bat. I mean, it
Right.
got to be silly.
It's the abuse
So
that always causes it, right? Yeah.
yeah,
Uh, Go ahead.
people said they didn't like it. I mean, it got to the point where people were turning the game off because they didn't want to watch pitching changes every 2 seconds. So it made the game better, in my opinion.
How did you feel about the instant replay? I've for a long time said every other sport has it. There should be situations where baseball should have it. And I actually remember, I want to see if you remember, the very first time an umpire used it, but it was not even a rule at the time.
Oh yeah, it's Frank Pulley and Greg Gibson were in Miami.
That's
Uh,
it. You knew it, you
yeah.
would know it.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, like, we all knew it
Figured
because
you
we
would.
got a phone call the next day saying we're not doing it anymore. At the time. Um, so your question was, what do I think about replay? When we first started replay, I think all of us were like, no, we don't want this. This is the worst thing in the world.
Mhm.
However, um, we've come to really wrap our arms around it, and if for no other reason, it's just that most of the time now, you're not the bad guy.
Yeah.
Um, I'll never forget, in the old days when the ESPN news was first coming out. Every 30 minutes, they played the same show over and over. And I had a play in Philadelphia one night, and to this day, I don't know whether I was right or wrong. But Linda Cohn at ESPN decided that I was wrong. I think she's a big Phillies fan anyway, and they showed the replay every 30 minutes it was on, and it was her telling everybody how bad I was, that I had missed that call. It was a catch no catch in the outfield on a rainy night in Philly in the old Veteran Stadium, and the turf was soaking wet. You couldn't see the glare from the light was so bad you couldn't tell whether I was right, wrong, or otherwise. But it didn't matter. She told everybody I was wrong every 30 minutes. I was wrong. I had to watch that on TV all night long, and that's a miserable feeling. And there's been other
Sure.
examples of the same thing. That if you're wrong, I mean, hey, look, we're wrong. We say we're wrong, and I can assure you of one thing: no matter what anybody else thinks, people go, these guys don't care. Oh yeah, we do.
Yeah.
And being wrong is a miserable feeling. It's just nobody. I know that people say it's easy for you to say it because it affects you. It does affect you. In many ways, it does affect us. It
That's the
affects you with the
example.
playoffs and everything else. So
I think,
but also more side, it just hurts me deep inside because my objective is to be right
mhm.
every single time, and I understand that I'm not going to be right every single time. But my objective and my goals are to do everything that I can possibly do to be right every time.
Yeah, I think the example of how much it does hurt when you get it wrong, and this is the extreme example, but it's a real example. I think it was a human moment, and it was a really good human moment for baseball in general, in my opinion. And forgive me for not knowing the umpire's name. I know you know the umpire's name. The guy that missed the call, that would have been the perfect game with, I think it was
Jim Joyce.
Galarraga, Jim Joyce. Yes, I forgot it. And I mean, it broke him down. It broke him down.
Mhm.
And the next day, he came out and apologized and stuff. And that was, I'll be honest with you, I've never had a bad opinion of umpires, but that was the first time I really saw the umpires, how much it hurt him. I
Mhm.
mean, it was very tough on him. So
Nobody
you're
wants
right.
to be that guy.
Yeah,
Nobody
no.
wants to be that guy
Mm.
ever. I mean, in the World Series this year, um, Jazz Chisholm came up in my plate job, and he had briefly argued a pitch his previous at bat, and there was a pitcher went to the catcher went to the mound for a pitcher's meeting or whatever, and Jazz looked at me and goes, "Hey, Fletch," he goes, I looked at pitch because I think it was a little bit down. And I said, well, I'm sorry to hear that because I certainly didn't intend to call a pitch that was down a strike. I said, you do understand, however, that I am trying to be right every single time. This is what I know because you're crazy. You're just being crazy now. Oh, but I'm serious. I mean, my objective is to be right, and not just sometimes, every time. And I'm not going to be right every time. Everybody knows that. That's no secret. But that's certainly our objective. And to a man, I've never worked on a field with anybody at any level where that wasn't their objective. Some people were better at it than others at different levels and whatnot. But everybody's goal and objective was to get every play in whatever sport I was officiating in correct. There's
Mhm.
never been a time nobody's ever suggested to me that I should do otherwise.
Yeah.
Sometimes you hear that. You hear college football fans saying, because I'm an Ole Miss fan, I've heard some of the guys that sit with the games before talking about, oh, the league wants Alabama to win this game so they can. Uh, None of that's true. It's just not. They just guys may be wrong occasionally.
Human.
Most of the time they're not. Most of the time
Right.
you think they are, but they're not. But
Always.
sometimes they are,
Yeah, I
but
found it
not intentionally.
interesting that a lot of times players they'll argue with the ump about a call, but then they'll swing and miss, and immediately they turn around and you can see that they're mouthing to him asking, "Was that a strike?" So, they're
Yeah,
arguing
no,
that you got that one wrong, and the next one they swing it and they're like, "Hey, was that a strike up?"
yeah, I'll just leave that alone.
Yeah, but it happens all the time. I mean, we can see that
Oh,
obviously
it
on
does.
TV.
No, it
Um,
does.
so here it is. We've led up to this moment. I've kind of really cultivated it, probably drug it on too long. Let's talk about the World Series moment. How and when did you find out that you were going to be selected to be a part of that crew?
So you can't work back to back rounds in the playoffs. So last year I worked the wild card round, and I worked the league championship series between Philly and Arizona. So I knew I wasn't working the World Series last year. Um, this year I'd worked that division series round, so I knew that I had a chance to work the World Series. They take the World Series umpires out of the division series. They take the league championship series out of the wild card series. So like I said, you can't work back to back rounds. So you know that if you work one of those rounds, kind of where you have a possibility of going. Things have been going pretty well for me the last couple of years. I had several years where things didn't go the same way for different reasons. But the last couple of years, I've been fortunate and things have gone the right way. And I had just a gut feeling this could be my year, my chance. And some of the guys that are always seem to know what's going on, they kept telling me, "Hey, you're in, you're good," and all this. And it was a Sunday afternoon, and I knew they were making the phone calls that day. And
Mhm.
I waited around and waited around. I actually had a deal every time I ever got promoted or anything in the minor leagues. They call my parents. They'd say, "Hey, let's go to Cracker Barrel." And so we go to Cracker Barrel and sit there and visit for 2 or 3 hours and talk about what had happened last year, what was getting ready to happen this year with the promotion and all that. And so just kind of honor them. I went to Cracker Barrel that morning and thought maybe they'll call while I'm here at Cracker Barrel, and but they didn't. And so I got home and I was just kind of hanging around the house and hanging around the house. And next thing you know, it's getting to be like 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and you hadn't heard anything, and you're going, maybe this isn't going to happen. And I called a friend of mine and said, "Hey, have you heard anything at all?" "I haven't heard a word." He said, "Just hang in there." I said, A little while longer. Finally, I had some stuff to do. I said, "You know what? Heck with it." I got up and I went to the mall to return an iPhone to the Apple store that I had to turn back in. And just as soon as I handed the woman the phone, my other phone rang, and it was the office. I was like, so here I am in the middle of the mall talking to my boss, and he was very complimentary and very kind, and all right, I'm 57 years old, be 58 here in a couple of days, and I got tears rolling down my face. I'm so
Awesome.
excited. I mean, it's all I ever wanted to do. This is obviously I told you I was umpiring, leaving my high school game to go umpire a college slash double A game in my high school year. This is what I wanted to do. This was the end goal. This was the objective, and to get that call was the most exciting thing that's happened in my professional career.
The moment that you're at the summit of Mount Everest for
It
yourself.
is.
Yeah.
It is. The weird thing was is that uh, as excited and all that I was, and I realized, okay, now I have to go out here and do this. And
My next question was, what's it like coming out of that gate, going out there and you see the crowd, you feel the electricity?
so there's they've changed the way they do things the last several years. And there's seven umpires that work the World Series. There used to only be six, and whoever was the crew chief who worked game one, there was a game seven, he worked game seven as well, and there was nobody kind of waiting in the wings if somebody got hurt. Well, when there's somebody got hurt, they're like, oh my gosh, we got to have somebody here. We can't do this for the World Series. So now they have seven umpires, all seven on site. So the game before you work the plate, you're not on the field, you're in the locker room. So for game one of the World Series, I was the reserve umpire in the locker room. So I'm just watching all this going on, going, and you really want to be out there, but you're happy that
Sure.
you're there. Don't get all that, but you're like, oh my gosh, it almost makes it worse the next night because all these other people already had one night of World Series. You've still had zero.
Yeah.
But I told myself a while back, um, if you ever get the opportunity to do this, there's no reason to be nervous. There's no reason to be scared, whatever word you want to use. You've done this a gazillion times in your life, and this is this is it. And I was really and truly much more nervous in the playoff rounds I had last year and the playoff round I had this year in the division series because if I messed those up, I wasn't going to go to the World Series.
Mhm.
If I didn't do a good enough job, then they were going to pick somebody else. So I figured I'm here now. They're not going to grab like in the old vaudeville days, grab a hook and pull me off
Say,
the
all right,
field.
she's fine,
You
buddy.
know, I
Yeah.
was more relaxed than I think I've ever been. I was more at peace than I think I've ever been behind the plate. There's two incredibly good teams with superstar players everywhere. A jammed house with movie stars and uh, everywhere. I mean, it's LA. I mean,
Uh,
everywhere you look, there was somebody that you'd seen before,
mhm.
sitting there. Um, and I was just absolute 100% absolute at ease and at peace. And it was one of the most fun times I've ever had in my life. And we had the Yankees were coming back at the end and had a chance to maybe tie it up there at the end.
Mhm.
And oftentimes when you hit extra innings, like, oh, here we're going to get extra innings and all this.
Like, come on.
What if we do? We do. Whatever.
Yeah.
This is I'm enjoying the heck out of this.
Yeah.
Uh, so yeah, it was great fun.
Let's get to meet any of the movie stars that are in the audience, in the crowd. Do y'all get to go
Yeah,
up and talk
very,
to them?
every once in a while you do. Several years ago, actually many years ago, I was in LA, and our locker room was in a different spot, and we had to walk in front of a walkway where all the people were going to the Diamond Club or whatever. And that's where all the stars go, and then they fan out from there. And it was a Thursday night, and Anthony Edwards was the guy who played in Top Gun, was Goose in Top Gun, and he was on ER. He played a doctor in the ER. And it was
Mhm.
Thursday night. And ER came on Thursday night, and
Dr. Green.
to train. I just happened to notice he was standing there with his son. I really noticed his son first, and I was working the plate, so I gave his son a baseball. And he goes, "Hey man, I really appreciate that." And I looked up and realized who it was. I go, "Oh, you're welcome." I go, "Hey, aren't you supposed to be at work tonight?" He's like, "Yeah, that's real funny, pal. Just keep moving,
Just keep
But
moving.
just keep moving, yeah.
That's
But
funny
yeah, every
stuff.
once in a while, yeah.
Yeah,
But the
that's
years I worked
awesome.
with Joe West, the years I worked with Joe West, I met a ton of people. Joe knew everybody and every. I mean, he knows everybody. So those 5 years, there was somebody every night. It seemed like,
Yeah.
but not
How
as
many
much
hits
anymore.
has he up now?
But he's retired now.
That's right. He did just retire.
Yeah,
That's right.
he retired a couple of years ago. Yeah, but he had a long career. Worked more games than anybody in the history of baseball. I was with him when he worked his 5,000th game.
Oh, wow.
Nobody will ever break his record. It's just it's because we have vacation time now, and he didn't have any of that when he first started his career. That'll never happen again. That's a record that will never be broken.
Wow. That is awesome. I guess you guys have a umpire Hall of Fame. Would that be correct?
We don't. There are
No.
umpires that are in Cooperstown. Um,
Okay.
how they got there and whatnot is
It's another story for
well,
another day.
yeah, exactly. It's exactly what it is. But there hasn't been anybody lately.
Yeah,
And I would just say that if anybody deserved to be in it, Joe would certainly deserve to be in it. He
sure.
was on the ballot last year, didn't make it, but hopefully in the future they'll see that that's the right thing to do because if anybody deserved to be in the Hall of Fame, it's a guy who worked more games than anybody else. He just
Right.
does.
Yeah, I want to point out something that is only interesting to me probably, but I'm still going to throw it in here. On game one, you guys obviously I went into extra innings, and it just so happened on that night I am in South Carolina. I'm running a marathon the next morning, so I'm on the Eastern time zone, and all I want is this game to get over with so I can go to sleep because I know I'm not sleeping while the game's going on. And they tied up, and then Freddie Freeman. I promise you, when he walked up, I know were you watching, or you're aware of the Kirk Gibson home
Yeah,
run, but were you watching it when it happened back in
I
'88?
was. I was. Yeah.
Yeah. So Freeman's coming out, and he's had this hurt foot, and I turned to my wife and I said, "No, please, no, don't do it. Home run." What was that like in Yankee Stadium? You could have heard a pin drop, I bet, whenever that ball went out. Or that, y'all, he
Well,
was
no,
in LA. That was in
that
LA. That
was
was
in
game
LA.
one. That
Yeah,
was
game
game
one in
one.
LA. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was rather loud,
It was
even in the
the
locker room where I
opposite.
was.
That's right.
Yeah,
Yeah. So it
absolutely.
was, I just remember being so tired. I just turned the TV off. And then the marathon was not a great marathon for me the next morning. I'm just going to leave it at that. So it was a long day the next day. Um, one other question. Did you see anyone in the crowd? And this is the conspiracy theory I must throw out that was messing with my Yankees in the fifth inning of the game that they just kept messing up. I said, I've got to ask Andy, there had to be something outside of there. Had to be ghosts. Something had to be happening. I've never seen anything like that on a ball field.
Yeah, I didn't see any ghosts. Uh, but ghosts are hard to see, so
I guess
they
so.
could have been there. I just didn't see them. But no, I mean they're in Yankee Stadium, so you wouldn't think that'd be a thing. But that was it was crazy. I was at third base that night, and it just the number of things that happened, back to back to back, it's just bad luck.
Yeah, I've never seen anything like that on a big
Uh,
league team in one inning.
yeah, it was yeah. At the time, I did. I mean, again, I'm watching my part of the game, and I'm not really paying attention to. Not paying attention is not the right word to use, but not concentrating on other things that are happening.
Sure.
Even so much what the score is, quite honestly. I just went to that half inning and looked at it and realized, oh, look at there, that's something they scored. And just during the game, I don't concern myself with those. It's not important to me how many runs they scored. It's irrelevant to me. I don't care who wins. I know people don't understand that, don't believe it, but I could not possibly care less who wins. I have no interest in the winner or loser. I want to win. My portion of what I do. I want to try to beat the replay system, to beat the computer, beat whatever it is. I want to win that. Whatever happens with the game, I, sometimes I don't even realize it happens afterwards. Now, certainly afterwards, we saw that we're like, oh my gosh, look at that. But
Yeah.
but during,
You're the
just not even a thing.
exception. You have to be the exception to the rule, right? So I would say most umpires probably have favorite teams and stuff, or is that the norm?
Yeah, I don't think anybody's got a favorite team. I'll tell
Wow,
you a
that's
quick
amazing.
one more quick story for you. When
Yeah,
I
yeah,
was in
no,
the
I love it.
low minor leagues in the Appalachian League, working with a guy named Chris Jarbo was my partner, and Chris actually came to see me in the World Series. He came to a couple of games in New York. We still stay in touch. This was 1989. We were partners in the Appalachian League, um, and he had worked, and he was from Baltimore. He had worked in the clubhouse with the Orioles in the summer, washing towels or whatever. And so he got into umpiring, and the first time we went to Bluefield, West Virginia, was where the Baltimore Orioles rookie ball affiliate was. It was my turn to work the plate because we just change every night. And he looked at me and goes, "Hey, Fletch," he goes, "Do you mind if I work the plate tonight?" He goes, "It's the Orioles team and all that." He goes, "I really like to work the plate. And have at it." And so he did. And by the fifth inning, he had thrown out like six guys. He had thrown every bat and ball they had out of the dugout. I never forget. We dressed in like the lawnmower shack, and they brought two chili dogs, best chili dog I've ever had in my life. I have no idea what they did, but it was fantastic. But they bring two chili dogs and two coats, put them on the tractor in the lawnmower room. I just remember he was just dejected and miserable. I looked at him and go, "I like the Orioles now." So that's kind of a they don't they're not rooting for us other than they want us to be right. Actually, they want us to be whatever goes in their favor. They really don't want us to be right.
Oh, sure,
Um,
sure, yeah.
so so yeah, they don't. It just you just learn from an early time on that you just there are certainly people in the game that I like better than other people in the game. But just human beings. But as far as teams and organizations and all that, I don't think any of us. I don't think I know that we just don't care.
Funny, I
Even
heard
guys that grew up fans.
Yeah, I heard a commentator once say that it should be acceptable that if an umpire gets a call right that they've challenged, that you guys should be able to spike something. So you see the players always celebrate moments. Like the umpire should have their moment to be able to like,
Yeah.
see, told you so. Yeah, I love that stuff. Well, look, I could talk to you all night. Baseball is definitely one of my passions and loves, and it's a unique experience to be able to speak to somebody that just made it to the top of the mountain, so to speak. So let me just ask you this before we get out of here. What's next for Andy Fletcher?
Well, we'll see what happens with this contract and see how long I'm going to go. I don't know how long I'm going to go. I'm certainly getting close to the end of my time. It's flown by. It's been just an absolute blast, but it's just been a blur as well. But I still got a few more years left. Hopefully, I'll get the opportunity to be a full-time crew chief next year and see where it goes from there. Heck, I'd love to work another World Series. You never can tell.
About like 5 years, 10 years, or how does that work?
Every 5 years is our
Every 5 years.
contract. So yeah.
All right.
So
So that's pretty good then. I hope you do get back there to the World Series. Hopefully the Yankees have a better outcome next year because they're going to be back there. So what would you leave anybody that's trying to grind right now? Because I actually have a friend, his son is in AA ball umping as we speak. He just got the promotion to AA this past year. What would you give some young
I
person
know
if
this.
you could look
I
back?
know this person. I know
You
this
do?
person. Of course I do. Um, Look, if you're going to put all this time and effort into doing this, then just don't give up. That's what you asked me earlier. I never really answered the question, but when I was in AAA, I was there for several years, and there were a number of people that would come, like local umpires or whatever, high school umpires, come to the game sometime. They'd say, "Hey, how long are you going to do this for? You're going to keep doing this?" Um, and the answer was, "Yeah." I put so much time and effort into this that they're going to have to tell me that they don't want me. They're going to have to release me, and then I'll go try to do something else.
Mhm.
But to spend all this time doing this and not to continue to do it, uh, to see it through, it just seems silly to me. My parents had great I can't say it, work ethics,
I got you on that
and
one. Yeah.
thank you. Both of them did. My mom would. My mom was a very small in stature woman, but I was scared to death all of my life, and I would have been scared she'd have come and got me if I'd have quit. There was no quitting. That wasn't an option. And it just that's just the way I was raised. So my advice to anybody that's going to do this is I would get an education before I went to umpire school. Uh, so you have something to fall back on. That's something that I did not do. I went to Ole Miss, but just I didn't finish. Um, but don't quit. Work your tail off every day, and don't quit. And now, if you do this, if you do things the right way, keep your nose clean, as my grandfather used to say, then good things will happen. Uh, so just keep working.
What I think that's a great message. If it's something that's a passion of yours and you've started to pursue it and you're getting some traction on it,
Mhm.
keep working. Find you some mentors is something I like to tell a lot of the guys that
Sure.
start out in something that's difficult. Find a few mentors that's done it well. Pick their brain on a regular basis. Try to emulate good habits. And in the end, you never get anywhere if you don't believe you're going to make it. You got to believe you're going
No,
to make it. You
got
got
to
to
believe.
keep working. Got to keep
I
grinding.
agree.
Well, Andy, I have absolutely enjoyed our conversation. Probably one of my favorite
Sure.
conversations I've had in 2.5 years on a podcast. Anybody that knows me would say, absolutely, he's telling you the truth on that. And I've had some amazing guests, but thank you for taking some time out, stepping in here and sharing some stories with my fans. I know that they are going to absolutely enjoy this message, sir.
I hope so. It's great to be with you.
I love the chase and the hunt, and I set the pace when I'm running. I always take what I want and I always give it 100. Don't need a bank, no, I'm funded. Play the game like it's nothing. I'm always thankful for something. Don't take for granted, stay humble. Now wake up! It's time to look at the enemy. Look in the mirror if he is no friend to me. It's not working out, maybe it's the chemistry. It's time to break up so I can make a better me. Better believe in your mind, cause it's everything. You can mold, shape,